Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for June 12th, 2024. Let me begin with a reminder of the press conference, the emergency press conference that will be taking place today at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. It's going to be at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., but it will be available through a Zoom link. I will have at the bottom of the description page a link for you if you want to participate. It begins at 1 p.m. The speakers will be Scott Ritter, Ray McGovern, Colonel Richard Black, and Helga Zepp-LaRouche. And the topic is the danger of nuclear war is real and it must be stopped. Now, what we're seeing is a shift in the world away from the war policy and the depression policy of the Western oligarchy. And this was very clear at the just concluded St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. At this forum, President Putin addressed the fact that despite all the talk about nuclear war and Russia preparing for nuclear strikes and so on, that Russia has no intention to start a nuclear war, but it is prepared, if it must, to use nuclear weapons to defend its national security and sovereignty. That's not any different than the policy of the Western countries. So why is Putin labeled the warmonger? Now, he also said he's open to negotiations at any time to achieve a partnership with Western nations. Is Biden listening? Are he and his failed salesman Blinken even capable of diplomacy? It seems they belong to the George W. Bush School of Diplomacy, which is that the only time you talk to the other countries is when you're giving them orders to get in line for the next war. The so-called coalition of the willing, which in reality means the subordinate slaves to the transatlantic order, who will prepare to do whatever is necessary to protect the Washington-London consensus. And that means defending the corporate cartels, the BlackRocks, and so on. But the St. Petersburg conference showed the emergence of an alternative. There were 21,000 participants there, with representatives from 3,500 companies. 139 countries were represented, and there were more than 1,000 deals signed. And the discussion process as a whole was very optimistic about moving into a new era of economic cooperation and development, of transportation corridors bringing goods and culture from one country to another. Now, it also exposed the deluded fantasies of the war hawks, that Russia is isolated, that it's been abandoned by the world, that it's crushed by sanctions. This was all exposed by the event. What was emerging was a coalition of the BRICS countries, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and the Eurasian Economic Union. And these organizations are moving full speed ahead with a commitment to the development of their nations and their neighbors in trade agreements that are mutually beneficial, that reflect the interests of sovereign nations. And that will be one of the messages of today's press conference, that war is an outmoded concept used by those countries that are collapsing to try to protect their supposed interests. Is the West going to insist on sticking with this failed model? Or will they take the offer of the global majority to stop the wars and turn to an economic system of cooperation for mutual benefit? That's what the potential is right now. And that's what has to be communicated to the deadheaded members of the US Congress, the members of both political parties, the media, the think tanks that are wedded to this idea that the American century will continue as a colonial looting policy. And what they don't tell you is that you're the next subject to be looted. That is that as the global south is moving away from this system, the loot that's needed is going to increasingly come from the people of Northern Europe and the United States. Now, at the close of the conference, the executive secretary of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum said, quote, "The world has changed and is becoming increasingly unified." He announced that there are now 59 countries that are applying to join the BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and the Eurasian Economic Union. So as I've been reporting, and as the LaRouche organization has been reporting, the empire is dying. It's buried under the debt of militarization and financialization. Just as LaRouche warned it would, when he commented on the inevitable policies of the monetarist approach that was adopted more than 50 years ago. On August 15, 1971, the break of the Bretton Woods system and the end of the dollar reserve system, the gold reserve system for the dollar. What LaRouche warned at that time was what was coming was deregulation of banking, deregulation of all areas of economic activity. He warned of the anti-growth green policies. Yes, 50 years ago, LaRouche was warning about this. And he was warning about the commitment to a neo-colonial policy backed by the speculative bankers of London and Wall Street. And he warned that what they're going to do, that is these bankers with their allies, such as BlackRock, Vanguard, and so on, is that they are going to proceed with Shaktian policies. Now, Schacht is Hjalmar Schacht, who was the darling of the British bankers, who was brought in, as Hitler's Minister of Finance after 1933 takeover by the Nazis. Now, for those people who talk about Hitler as a great German nationalist, why would he bring in the banker chosen by the City of London to carry out his economic policy? It's not that Schacht was so brilliant. It's that he was committed to the policy of primitive accumulation, of looting of the workforce on behalf of the corporate cartels, which at that time were called trusts, that were bringing him into power. That is, between the Rockefellers, the Harrimans, the City of London, represented by Sir Montague Norman. They said to Germany, the only way you're going to have any credit standing in the world is if you go with Schacht's policies. And Schacht's policies were slave labor. The concentration camps were initially slave labor camps where enemies of the state were sent to work for almost nothing. And the militarization was there to both enable the German economy to pay off debt, but at the same time, to build up for a war against the Soviet Union. Now, that's what the policies were in the 1920s that led to World War II. Today, we have the Great Reset, based on the same central idea of Shaktian policy, which is that you don't commit to the development of the interests of people of a sovereign state. You instead orient your investment policy toward quick buck speculation to cover the debt that you're never going to cover because you're deindustrializing. You're looting the physical economy to pay debt, to maintain some semblance of solvency, or better yet, liquidity, in a system which is hopelessly bankrupt. And that's what the Hitler Project is today. The model for this is the Schacht policy of the 30s and early 40s. And this is what is driving the world toward war, because most of the world is rejecting this. And it should be rejected by the people in Europe and the United States. So that's the purpose of this emergency press conference today, to warn people that it's time to wake up, that the policies of war will continue, the escalation will continue, until we end up at a nuclear war by accident or by intention. Well, there's an alternative, which is to build up this economic system based on the principle of investment for the benefit and welfare of the population as a whole, with an emphasis on investing in science and technology and infrastructure. That's what was discussed at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. That's what the BRICS represent. That's what the new system coming into being represents. And we have an opportunity in the West to be a part of that, or to be part of a dying empire imposing neo-colonial policies on subjects unwilling to accept it. And it's up to you to make that choice. So I would urge you, watch the press conference today, organize others to watch it, and join with us to bring in this new era of cooperation for mutual economic benefit.
The big question, what can we do about it? If we have the power to influence the course of history as individuals, then each of us has a corresponding moral responsibility to muster from within ourselves those capacities which enable us to do our part in shaping the course of civilization. Now, under that rubric, I say, what kind of news is newsworthy? The only news that's worth having is news which performs those functions, which enables government, which enables you as an individual and so forth, better to understand what is happening to this planet, to understand what the developments are that are shaping the course of history, and finally to indicate to you the facts which you need to look at so that you can judge what it is that you might be able to do which can contribute to bringing about a solution, an escape from the collapse of civilization. This is no pipe dream, this is no fantasy, this is real.